we've got Robbie Hanson. He's going to tell us about an alternative business model for our apps. So please welcome Robbie Hanson.
Can you guys hear me okay? All right. Well, we got a lot of content to go over, so I'm just going to jump right in. Most people have been led to believe that there are only 3 ways to make money from an app. Number 1 is the one-time purchase model, the oldest business model for software. Number 2, subscriptions. So fixed price every single month, user gets access to your app or your service. And number 3 is advertising. Some people like to call this the freemium model, but the money's coming from advertising, so I'm just going to call it the advertising model. And the question is besides these 3, what other options do we have? Now, you've probably seen hybrids to this approach, so think Spotify. So Spotify has a free version. The free version comes with advertising, and every so often, one of those advertisements is for Spotify itself, and the advertisement says something like, "Tired of hearing ads? Well, sign up for Spotify Premium and pay $5 a month, and you'll never hear ads again." But that's really just a combination. These are just hybrid approaches. So what else is there? I suppose if you can get a couple million preteen users to start using your app, then Facebook will come by you for $1 billion. But let's not consider that a serious business model. Let's put that on the shelf as wishful thinking. So besides these 3, the question is, what else is there? If you can believe that these are your only 3 choices, then Apple will be happy because they can continue to take their 15% cut. But I'm here to tell you that there's another option, a 4th option, and that's the business model that software forgot. And that's pay-as-you-go. Now, this is not a new business model in any sense of the term. It's how you pay your electricity bill. And it's how you pay for public transportation. Some of us maybe got here with Caltrain. That's a pay-as-you-go system. And if you didn't use Caltrain, then maybe you took an Uber, another pay-as-you-go system. Or maybe you rode an electric scooter, another pay-as-you-go system. A little bit closer to home, though, and that's modern cloud infrastructure. So Amazon Web Services, IBM's Bluemix, Microsoft's Azure. These are all pay-as-you-go systems. But what you don't see very often is pay-as-you-go for consumer-facing software applications. Now, you see it for games, like you can have an in-app consumable and you can buy a sword or a lightsaber or an extra life, but you don't see it outside of that context very often. And that's about to change, and let me explain why. So imagine that you're on a road trip, and you're driving across the United States, and you're starting to get low on fuel, and so you need to stop for gas. So you pull into small town, wherever USA, and you pull into the gas station, and you're looking up at the signage for the price. And the signage says this: any car, fill up your tank, $50. And you're thinking to yourself, well, that's pretty weird. I've never seen a gas station with a fixed price to fill up my tank before. And you're also thinking to yourself, well, that sucks for me because normally it only costs me $35 to fill up my tank. But you don't have a choice because you don't have enough gas to make it to the next town. So you fill up your tank and you miss out on $15, and as you drive away, you're starting to think about it and you're starting to get a little bit upset because you realize what it is that the gas station just did. The gas station had this diverse set of customers, some with small cars, some with medium cars, some with large cars, and some with trucks. And what they did is they just simply picked a price somewhere in the middle that allowed them to make a profit. And the end result of this is that small car owners like yourself just got ripped off. In fact, when you think about it, the small car owners are actually subsidizing the large cars and the trucks. And you realize that that's a little bit unfair. And you might be thinking, this is kind of a silly example. But this kind of stuff happens in the digital world all the time, with the same outcome and the same consequences. So there are people out there paying $10 a month to store 20 gigs. And there are people out there paying $10 a month to store close to a terabyte. When this kind of stuff happens in the real world, people get upset. But when it happens in the digital world, Nobody bats an eye. And I bring up this example for a reason. And that's because when I talk to people about pay-as-you-go as a business model for software, I'm met with two common objections. And the first objection is, you can't possibly do that because it's too confusing. The users couldn't possibly comprehend a pay-as-you-go system. If you gave them this option, their brains would literally explode. And I think that's a pretty pessimistic way of looking at your users. Because the fact of the matter is, they will understand it because they use it every single day. It's an intuitive business model. It's not very difficult to comprehend. And so they say to me, yeah, but it's totally different. For software, software's totally different. You see, your customers need to understand approximately how much money they're going to pay every month. And I 100% agree. That's true, they do. For cloud storage, I could right-click on a folder, choose Get Info, and it would tell me approximately how much storage I'm going to use. So maybe you're thinking, well, that's a simple example. Okay, how about something a little bit more complicated then? Your electricity bill. So you get billed in something called kilowatt hours. Now, I don't know about you, but I have no idea how many kilowatt hours I use per month. Maybe some of you do. And if so, then congratulations. You are not the average American. The average American does not even know what a kilowatt hour is. But occasionally people move from city to city and they change electricity companies. And when they do, they need to figure out their budget, right? So they need to figure out approximately what their electricity company is going to be. And that sounds like a difficult task because they don't even know what a kilowatt hour is. But people have a way of figuring these things out. For electricity, they talk to people. They go up to their neighbor and they say, hey, neighbor, you have the same size house as me, approximately. What do you pay for your electricity bill? Hey, neighbor, you live in the same apartment complex as me. What do you pay for your electricity bill? So it's usually not difficult for people to figure out approximately what their costs are going to be. And on top of that, we are software developers. We can build tools that help people estimate what their costs are going to be. So that's the first objection. The first objection is that it's too complicated. They couldn't understand it. And the second objection has to do with payments. So they say, I don't get it. And the reason why is because they're stuck in the existing business models. There's billable events that occur, right? And they say, okay, every time one of these billable events occurs, do we charge the credit card right then? No, you don't. Okay, well then we have to sum up all of the events that happened that month and then charge the credit card at the end of the month, right? No, you don't do that either. And they say, what? Then it's got to be the Bitcoin Lightning Network, right? We're making microtransactions on the blockchain. And I say, no, that's not it either. It's just really, really simple. How does your Metro card work? You take a ride on the bus, that's 30 cents or whatever, and you've got a balance, and then your balance drops by 30 cents, and eventually your balance gets close to zero, and you go and you top up your balance again. So for pay-as-you-go, you just use top-up billing. So with those two objections out of the way, let's dive a little bit deeper into this. Chances are, this is your app. Now, this is the user time curve. And what we're basically looking at here is a chart that says that you have a large number of users who use your app somewhat infrequently, somewhat sporadically. And then you have a smaller number of users who use your application constantly. And there's some standard-looking curve which connects the two ends of the spectrum. And there's some people out there that might be thinking to themselves, well, that's not my application. My application is the mirror of this, and all of my users use my application constantly, and only the people who don't know how amazing my app is, only they use the application sporadically. And if that's actually true, then you are Netflix. You are selling entertainment, or you are selling drugs. But for the rest of us, the curve looks kind of like this. And every single app is different, so every single app's going to have a slightly different curve. You guys get it. So the question is, how do we get this curve? Like, where is this coming from? Well, on the bottom axis here, we have product usage. So where the x-axis and the y-axis meet, that means they don't use your app at all. And way over here on the right-hand side, they're using your application constantly. They are addicted to your app. So what you do is you just grab some random user, doesn't have to be a customer, maybe they're using the 30-day trial or they're using the free tier or whatever, and just plot them on the x-axis according to their usage. and grab another user and just keep plotting users on the x-axis. And eventually you're going to have two users who have approximately the same product usage. And when that happens, just stack them on top of each other and then just keep going. And what you're going to end up with is little stacks along the x-axis, and then just draw a little curve along the top of those stacks. And you're going to get something that looks kind of like this. So this is just a good visualization tool for analyzing and thinking about business models, just in a general sense. So let's go over the three existing business models and how this works. So first up is the one-time purchase model. And the challenge here is that we need to pick a price. We need to say, okay, the price for our application is $10.99, and then you buy that, and then you own the app. And what's probably going to happen is that you're going to put out your price, and the people who use your application a lot, they're going to be more willing to pay that high price. And then you've got the people who use your application a little bit more infrequently, and they are going to be not so willing to pay that price. And so you're going to end up with most of your customers over here, and on the other side, not so much. And of course, we can play around with the price, right? We can say, well, maybe we're undervaluing ourselves, and if we raise our price, then these people will still pay for it, and we can make additional revenue that way. Or maybe we say, well, we can lower our price a little bit, and we'll miss out on some revenue over here on the right, but we'll make up for it in terms of additional users. And it's not that this is a bad business model. Like, maybe this is the perfect business model for your app. Maybe you are making an Xbox game, and you're going to come out with this game, and you're going to pair it with a bunch of media and marketing hype, and there's going to be people out there that want to play your game like 12 hours a day, and they're going to be willing to pay a high price right when that game comes out because they want to be first access to it. And then, you've got people over on the other side, and they're not going to be willing to pay that price. But if you lower your price over time as your media and your marketing dies down a little bit, then the people over on the right that want to play your game like 1 hour on the weekends if they don't have to mow the lawn, like they'll eventually pull the trigger on your app. But maybe you have a different type of app, and you're planning on coming out with version 2.0. And when you do, you've got these customers, and you want them to buy the upgrade, of course. So you're going to need to have enough bells and whistles and features and performance improvements to get them to do that again. And then you're going to have to do that for version 3 and for version 4 and for version 5. We all know the struggle. And we also know about bloatware. And that's what you might end up having. But if you're making critical business software, then your customers are businesses, and they often don't have a choice. They have to buy your upgrades, and when that's the case, you get another option. You can switch over to subscriptions really easily, and that's kind of a win-win because you don't have to make bloatware, and they don't have to use bloatware. So win-win. And case in point, it was critical business software that was early adopters of this model, but it does actually work for quite a large number of applications. Like, I get it, it doesn't work for every single application. Like, I understand. There's not authors writing books and then attempting to sell those books in the bookstore using a subscription model. So it doesn't work for everybody, but it does work for quite a bit of number of users. But there is a problem with subscriptions, and that's the cognitive barrier associated with signing up for a subscription. What do I mean by that? Okay. Think about all of the monthly expenses that you have in your life. Not software, just life in general. And you start going through the list, and you've got your mortgage payment or your rent payment, and you've got your health insurance, and maybe you have a car, so you have a car payment, and then you've got car insurance, and then you've got, don't forget about Netflix, and then you've got your cell phone bill, and if you live in a house, maybe you've got garbage and utilities, and maybe there's a gym membership, and the list goes on, right? When you ask people to sign up for a subscription, you're asking them to add to that list. That's not what people want to do. People want to trim that list down. And so that's a problem. And then, people have financial pressures sometimes. And when they have financial pressures, they start going through their credit card statements. And if you're on that credit card statement all the time, they're going to start to think about whether or not they can, trim you from that list. And on top of that, if you ask most people, you say, do you have any horror stories associated with subscriptions? There's a lot of people that do. I know I have one. So several years back, I moved from Florida to California, and when I did, I forgot to cancel my gym membership. And I found this out the next month when I looked at my credit card statement. Okay, it was 2 months later. And so I called up the gym in Florida and I said, I moved, I'd like to cancel my membership. And the lady on the other end, in a very chippery voice, she informed me that, I'm sorry, sir, our policy is that you need to come into the gym in order to cancel your membership. So that was fun to deal with. And I'm sure that your application is not going to be like this. What I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of people out there and they have baggage, and that baggage is hurting you. It's not helping you. But on top of that, there's a huge difference in people's minds between a one-time purchase and signing on the dotted line for a subscription, because that's what we're really asking them to do. And you can see this in your own life. So for example, maybe you go out to dinner, and when you finish the meal, the server comes around and she says, "Oh, sir, can we interest you in dessert tonight? We have a cheesecake and an espresso pairing, and it is $12, and it is delightful." And you think to yourself, "What the heck? I'm on vacation." And so you splurge and you buy the dessert, and you forget about the fact that you spent that money the second that you walk out the restaurant. And then you go home and you get a message from your friend, and he's talking about some new app that he just discovered. And so you go look at it, and it's a subscription. And they want you to pay $1 a month. And you think to yourself, I don't know. I'm going to have to think about this. And that's because there's a huge difference in your mind between a one-time purchase that you make and then you forget about it and it's gone, and signing on that dotted line. Because that's what we're really asking people to do. We're saying, hey, buddy, do you like our application? Huh? Well, then put a ring on it. So that brings us to the advertising model. And the advertising model looks like this, which is pretty cool. Because we get to make money from all of our users, not just the heavy users, all of our users. Of course, if the advertising model was so wonderful, it wouldn't be universally despised. And we all know what the problems with the advertising model is, right? You got businesses out there and they make targeted ads, and they want to put those targeted ads in front of a very specific group of users. And in order to do that, they're going to need an advertising platform that knows way too much about its users. And this, of course, leads to an ethical race to the bottom in terms of privacy. This is not news to anyone here. We all know about this kind of stuff. But that's not the only problem with the advertising model. Well, there's another problem, right? You've got this advertisement, and you need to shove it in the face of your users at some point. So, there's that problem. But besides those two, there's another problem that you need to think about. And that's that your revenue is related to the area under the curve. And that's cool. But it's the area under the curve times a price set by the advertisers. And the advertisers, they do not care about your application at all. Your application is just some way to get their advertisement in front of eyeballs, and that's it. And they do not care if your application is a fart application or if your application helps doctors cure cancer. And that's a problem, especially if you're an indie developer. Because maybe you've got a great idea for an app. Maybe you've come up with this cool idea, and it's going to help math teachers better teach algebra to third grade girls. And that sounds awesome. But the question that you have to ask yourself is this too niche for the advertising model? Am I going to get enough eyeballs for that type of an app? And so the advertising model has all kinds of problems with it. But I want to go back to those first two models really quick, because they both had a common problem, and they both have solutions that you've probably seen before. And so the problem with the one-time purchase model is we needed to pick a price, right? And so that was pretty challenging to do. And so oftentimes what you see is they'll take a single app and they'll split it into a pro version and a light version. And the idea here is that maybe we can get more users if we have a product with the lower price tag on it. And the subscription model has a completely different way of solving this problem. I'm just kidding. They do the exact same thing. So they have the gold product and they've got the silver product. And there's an irony happening here. And the irony is that the evangelists of the subscription model, they've been preaching to us for the last decade. And they've been preaching this message. And the message was that users do not care about products. They care about solutions. They've been saying, people don't want to buy a half-inch drill bit. They want a half-inch hole. People don't want products. They want outcomes. And the irony is that when it comes to their own stuff, they're still pretty stuck on products. The gold product, the silver product. With pay-as-you-go, we just get rid of these products. And we get this. And it looks like advertising, but instead of the advertisers picking the price for your application, you pick the price for your application. So what do I mean by that? Well, we're not picking a one-time purchase price, and we're not picking a fixed monthly price. What we're doing is we're picking a price that has something to do with your application, something to do with the way that the user uses your application. So if this was electricity, this would be in kilowatt hours. But how about a software example? So the simplest example that I can think of is a messaging application. So in a messaging application, every single message that goes through the system is going to have a sender and a receiver. So we can make the sender pay for it. So this is just like the postal system, right? This is just like good old snail mail. You got your stamp, and somebody needs to pay the cost of the stamp, and so the sender pays it, and the receiver doesn't need to pay it. And now you get to pick the price for that cost to send a single message through your system. And so maybe you pick a price like an eighth of a penny. You don't have to round up to the nearest fiat currency. That's not how this works. Modern cloud infrastructure, that's a good example. There's, in AWS, there's a price to send a single push notification. And that price is something like 0.0000001 cent. And so you get to pick any price that you want that makes sense for your application. And you're not limited to just one thing. So that's one metric that you could charge the users on. But there's more. You can pick more. So for a messaging application, if a user loses their phone, they don't want to lose their message history, so if they go get a new phone and sign into your app, they expect their message history to be there. So that means they're also storing message history in the cloud. So you can also charge for storage. And intuitively, this is a pretty understandable billing model. So the user says, okay, I pay some tiny little amount for every message that I send, and I also pay for the message history that I store in the cloud. That makes sense. And then your application can allow them to make informed decisions. Like maybe you say, oh, you can change a setting and you'll automatically delete messages after 6 months or a year or keep it forever. And the thing that I want to point out here is I want you to imagine the exact same application but as a subscription. Okay, so if this was a subscription, let's imagine that we were charging like $2 a month or something like this, right? And so what we would end up with is we'd end up with these users on the far right-hand side, they'd be paying that $2 a month. With pay-as-you-go, you still have those users paying $2 a month. Maybe on the far end, they're even paying more than $2 a month. And at the same time, the users who use your app infrequently, you're still making money from them. You're still making a profit from them. So with the subscription model, we would say to those users, we don't care about you. Go away. We don't want your money. And with pay-as-you-go, you say, oh, yeah, sure, we'll take your money. So let's go over one more example, just really quick, and that would be a screenshot application. So the idea here being user takes a screenshot and your application has some beautiful user interface for marking up that screenshot, and then you make it easy for them to upload that to the cloud, and then you make it easy for them to share that with their teammates, and then their teammates can maybe comment on it or whatever. So we've seen these before. So how would we do this using a pay-as-you-go? Well, right off the bat, you've got a photo being uploaded. So this could be like a stamp tax thing. And then you've got this photo being stored in the cloud again. So you've got some cloud storage going on. So maybe they store it for a month or two. And then you've got people coming to view this photo. And you don't know how big their team size is. Maybe that's a small team of just a few people. Maybe they're trying to get like information from a whole bunch of people, and they're going to have thousands of people coming to view your photo. So you can also charge based on how many times that photo gets viewed. And again, you get to pick the prices on all this stuff. So you're probably starting to see a pattern here. And the pattern is that you've got some back-end infrastructure that costs you money to run. And then you've got stuff happening in your application. And as long as you can charge for this stuff and the cost for and the price that you set for this exceeds what you've got going on over here in the cloud, you're going to make a profit. So you don't need to pick some fixed price and average everything out. You're just going to be able to make a profit off of all of your users, regardless of how often they're actually using your application. So before we actually dive into how to implement that, I just want to talk about one thing really quick, and that's how this business model competes in the marketplace. And I want to go back to that gas station example really quick. And so with the gas station, we got the fixed price gas station, and the gas station had that diverse set of customers with small cars, medium cars, large cars, and trucks, and they had picked a price somewhere in the middle that would allow them to make a profit. And now imagine what would happen if a gas station moved in right across the street, and this gas station had a pay-as-you-go pricing model. So a normal gas station, right? So who do you think is going to be the first set of customers that are going to leave the gas station with the fixed price? It's going to be the small cars, right? Because they were the ones getting ripped off the most. And so they leave and they defect and they go across the street. And at the end of the month, the gas station with the fixed price, they're going to realize that they have a problem on their hands. Because now they're losing money. And chances are what they're going to do is they're going to raise prices. And when they raise prices, it's going to be the medium car owners that are now getting ripped off. And so what do you think is going to happen next? The medium car owners are going to leave, and they're going to go across the street. And if we don't straight up put this gas station out of business, then at minimum, we're going to take a bite out of it. And that's why I like to say that this is a business model with teeth. People view this business model as a fair pricing model. And they'll gravitate toward it if they feel that they're being ripped off elsewhere. And another example I like to give, just because it's fun, is Gmail. And every 6 months or so, it seems, there's some blogger that will write some article about how Google, spies on its user with some spicy title like that, right? And, there are people out there that don't know that this kind of stuff is happening. And they read it for the first time, and they are outraged. And so they take to social media, and they start sharing it. And for some reason, it starts trending. And the next thing you know, we got #DropGmail trending. And after these people are done, virtue signaling on Twitter about this, then they go and they do a Google search for, Gmail alternatives. And the first set of results that they get is other free email, also by search engine providers. And so they've got the same conflict of interest there. And then they find email providers that have a price associated with it. And that price is like $5 a month. And it's usually around this point in time when these people realize that they have never paid for email before in their life. And now they're thinking about it, and they've got free over here, and then they've got $60 a year over here. And usually at this point, they start to rationalize. And they're like, well, I don't have anything to hide. maybe it's not that big of a deal. And that's usually how it goes. Rinse and repeat every 6 months. Now, I want you to imagine what would happen if these people did the same search, and they landed on a website, and the website said something like this. Every single email that you send is 1/4 of a penny, and if you sign up today, we give you a $10 credit in our system. Now, I'm willing to bet that there's a lot more people that would sign up for that email service than the email service with the $60 a year cost. I'm not trying to argue that they're going to put Gmail out of business, but perhaps they could take a bite out of it. So I like to say that this is a business model with teeth because it's pretty good at competing in the marketplace. So we make a product that's pay-as-you-go. And it's a developer framework that provides zero-knowledge sync and messaging. But also, we have clients building on top of our system that are also pay-as-you-go. And so we've been learning about this for the past 1.5 years or so, and we want to share with you what we've learned. So zero knowledge, what the heck am I talking about here? Okay, just a quick idea of what that is. You've got Alice here, and Alice wants to share she wants to sync some data to her other devices, like her iPad or her phone, or maybe she wants to send a message to Bob. And to do this, she's going to go through the cloud. And Alice can communicate with the cloud securely, and Bob can communicate with the cloud securely. But that message from Alice to Bob, that's not secure because you've got this server in the middle that can read the content. Now, this happens to be a pretty big problem for pretty big industries. You've got banking, financial services, insurance, healthcare is a big one. There was a talk yesterday that talked all about encrypting data for healthcare. They talked about this same stuff. Government would be another example. And what we do is we provide the solution to this. So we provide end-to-end security, real end-to-end security, using zero knowledge. So that means that there's an open source framework. You drop this framework into your app, and it does all the sync and messaging stuff that you're used to, the uploads, the downloads, the push notifications, blah, 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 you get it. But more importantly, before it pushes any data to the cloud, it encrypts it using keys that we don't have. So we can't read any of the content created by your application. So it is zero knowledge. So, you think about this stuff, and you realize that we've been able to communicate securely with servers for like decades now, right? And the reason we can do that is because a long, long time ago, somebody figured out the encryption for it, and then they created tools for us, and today we use those tools, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and the tools are so easy to use, and so why would you not use them? And Apple comes along and says, if you try to communicate with the server in a non-secure manner, we will like block your app. And so there are tools for this. And now you have tools to do this, and so it's just another tool in your tool belt. So what does this have to do with pay-as-you-go? Okay, well, we had to make the back end for all of that. And so we bill our customers, people who build on top of our framework, we bill them using pay-as-you-go. Amazon Web Services is what we built on, and we just charge our customers exactly what Amazon Web Services charges us, plus our fee, because we got to eat, right? And the great thing about modern cloud infrastructure, whether you're using us or building it for yourself, is that it's pay-as-you-go all the way down. So what do I mean by that? So now we're talking about how you actually build these things. How do you actually build pay-as-you-go for your software applications? And if you're building on top of modern cloud infrastructure, there's this cool pattern that you'll see, and that pattern is, for push notifications, you have an unlimited number of push notifications, and there's some fixed cost associated with each push notification, so 0.0000 whatever. And cloud storage is the same way, so you have an infinite amount of cloud storage again, and you've got some fixed cost for it. And CPU usage happens to be the same way. So I've got up here serverless. So if you've never heard the term serverless before, you'll be forgiven for thinking that that means that there are no servers involved. But it's actually the opposite. There's a ton of servers involved. But you don't have to deal with them. You don't have to provision them. You don't have to manage them. You don't have to worry about scaling them. It's really easy. All you have to do is write a little bit of code. And then you give that code to Amazon, and you say, run this code whenever some trigger event occurs. And that trigger event might be an incoming HTTP request, or somebody uploaded a file into S3. And Amazon handles taking your code, putting it onto some server, putting it into some runtime environment, like Node or Python or Go or whatever language of your choice, running it, and then keeping track of how long that runs, and then shutting it all down when it's done. And they just charge you based on the number of milliseconds that it ran. So again, an infinite amount of CPU usage and some fixed price associated with it. And look, HTTP requests too. You don't have to manage servers. If you have a couple REST endpoints that you want to set up, you just say, hey, here's my REST endpoints. And you manage accepting all those connections. Oh, and when you do get a connection, a request in on one of those endpoints, then invoke this code over here. So you're starting to see the pattern of how easy it is to do. And the pattern makes it really easy for you to figure out exactly how much each user costs you. Not like an average, not like, okay, here's my total server costs and I have X number of users, so I divide it by X. No. Specifically for Alice, specifically for Bob, specifically for Carol, you get to know the exact cost per user. So maybe the way to do that is really easy. So you get an incoming request from Alice. Okay, so increment that. And then maybe, she was sending a message to Bob, and Bob has 2 devices, so you increment that guy. And then maybe she's storing some data, so then you update that stuff. And, maybe it took you 100 milliseconds of CPU time to process that request. And so you can keep track of all this stuff in real time. And we have APIs that do this. So you can query our system and say, hey, give me the real-time usage data for a user XYZ789, and we come back and we say, okay, it's 6.2 milliseconds of CPU time and 422 push notifications and blah, blah, blah. And then we also have that data for January and February. And if you were building your own system, you could build it just like this. You could track the actual usage on a per-user basis. So putting all this together, you now have the actual server costs on a per user basis. Now all you got to do is find out how you would set up a billing model or some pricing system such that when you layer that on top of the actual per user costs, you're going to make a profit. You're going to make a profit from everybody, not just some select users, but everybody. And you have all that data, so you can do all this kind of stuff. And the great thing about it is that we know intuitively that a person's willingness to pay for our app is related to how often they actually use our application. And so the end result of this is going to be that people that don't use our application very often, their total cost is less. And they might be willing to pay that because it's tied to usage. And people who use our application more, they're going to be more willing to pay higher costs. So, like I said, we've been doing this for about a year and a half now, and we've learned some tricks of the trade. And that's what I want to share with you right now, is how this stuff actually works and the optimizations that you can make. So, first off, when you guys figure out your pricing model, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to figure out like a base cost for something. And let's say that you figure out that your base cost is 1. Now, I don't know what 1 is. Maybe 1 is 1 cent, maybe 1 is 1/10 of a cent. It doesn't matter. The idea being that if you charge the user 1, you're going to make a profit. And so what you do is you go to your website and you say that the base cost for this thing is 5. And the more that somebody uses your application, the bigger discount they get. And when you do this, something magical happens. Because your users who use your application a lot, they're going to get bigger discounts, which means you're going to be more competitive against your competition. And then you've got users who use your application infrequently, and they're getting charged 5. And something magical happens here, too, because think about your electricity bill. Do you have any idea what you're paying for kilowatt hours? Probably not, and you don't care, because what you actually care about is your total monthly cost. That's what really matters. And for these people that use your application infrequently, their total monthly cost is still low. But at the same time, they're your highest profit margin customers. And so you think about it, these people that are using the app infrequently, these are the people that were either ignored by other business models or blatantly ripped off by them. And then they come to you, and they get a fair price. And not only do they get a fair price, but they're your highest profit margin users. And secret number 2 has to do with onboarding. So onboarding is a problem for those other business models. So for the pay once customers, or for the pay once business model, maybe you have to convince them with really good App Store reviews, or maybe you say, we've got a 30-day trial. And 30-day trial, depending on how often they want to use your application, that might not be enough time for them to figure out whether or not they want to pull the trigger and buy your app. And then you've got the subscription model. And the subscription model has all kinds of games that it plays. So it might say, okay, we have a free tier for you. And that's always a challenge because people always want to try to stay within the free tier and not give you any money. And then you can say, okay, well, maybe the other thing we can do is we can say, well, there's pro features. And so maybe there's some limitations or some quotas on how often they can use your application. And that's all problematic stuff. With PayAsYouGo, you don't have to deal with any of those shenanigans. Instead, you just have them sign up and you say, you get a $5 credit in the system or a $10 credit in the system. You can start right now. There's no limitations. Use our app. You're not giving them $5. You're not giving them $10. You're just giving them a balance to start with. And this ties in with secret number 3, which has to do with conversions. Because time trials are difficult. Well, we're not giving the user a time trial. We're giving the user a usage trial. And how long it takes for somebody to burn through that credit is based on usage, not specific sets of time. And so think about this user here who is using your application infrequently. And maybe it took them 18 months to burn through that $5 credit. And at the end of 18 months, they have now built up a habit around your application, because they've been doing it for a while. Your application is how they solve some problem or some want or their need in their life. And now, 18 months later, they've finally run out of credit. And it's at this point that they have two choices to make. So option number one is they can make a one-time purchase and make that problem go away for another 18 months. And then they can get back to work, finish their work on time, and go have dinner with their spouse. And option number two is they can spend a whole bunch of time and energy and frustration looking for an alternative app and then try to learn that one. So what do you think they're going to do? And so conversions tend to be pretty high. I'm not going to try to convince you that this is like the perfect business model for your app. But I do want you to believe that it's another tool, it's another option that you can possibly use. Maybe it's the right choice. Because in reality, pay-as-you-go is a little bit of all the other three. In my opinion, it's the best parts of the other three. Because like advertising, we get to make money from all of our users, not just the high-end group. And like the one-time purchase model, we're not asking users to sign on the dotted line. You know, they get to cognitively classify our application as a one-time purchase. And then for our heavy users, you know, the users that want to start a relationship with us, they're ready to commit, they can plug in their credit card information, and we will automatically top up their balance for them whenever their balance drops below some threshold. And like the subscription model, we're making money, we're making revenue from our users every single month. In fact, pay-as-you-go is most closely related to subscriptions. Some people think they're the same thing. I argue that they are not. That there's enough differences to consider them a separate business model. But they are related. Maybe they're cousins. And that's a good thing, because we've actually learned a lot from the subscription economy over the past decade. We've learned that it's true. Users care less about products than they do about solutions. And we've also learned how important it is to align our application with the user's continued happiness. And again, it's true. That works best when the user is paying every month. But in my opinion, it's time to take subscriptions to the next level, to get rid of the fake products and to tear down the gas stations with fixed prices, and to take on the established advertising models, and maybe, just maybe, take back a little bit of our privacy while we're at it. Thank you.